right. Welcome to Middleman Politics. I'm Chief Riley. What a week that we had last week, and now what appears a situation that could continue. What's next? Lots to talk about, lots of things to go over, and we're still dealing with a pandemic. Let's get right into it. First, I want to lead off with a couple of things before we actually get into the meat and potatoes of this show today. Coronavirus cases, 6,315,231. Just shy of 375,000 deaths worldwide. The daily new cases are on the rise. We are now getting another region of the world that is getting pummeled right now with this new cases, and that's Brazil. As the United States really is kind of staying steady. Sort of headed in the right direction according to some test numbers. But when you look at this rate right here, this is the daily rate on the left, folks. This is worldwide. This is not United States. We're now adding over 120,000 cases a day, Tuesday through Saturday. We always know about that lag on Monday, Sunday and Monday. The numbers are a lot lower. So before all of the protesting and then the violent riots, we were still dealing with a pandemic that is not done yet. Now, whether you believe in states being open or not open is you're right. And I'm not here to argue about states opening up or not. Nonetheless, there are still CDC guidelines in place for social distancing and mask wearing in public, especially if you cannot social distance. It is advised to wear masks. Here is the update on the numbers. In the United States, right now we have added 5,674 cases over the last 24 hours. That number goes up throughout the day. So for 143 on a Monday, it's actually a pretty slow start, which could be a good sign, hopefully. Worldwide, we've added 55,000 cases. So we're basically pacing the 100,000 mark or higher like we have for the past 5 to 6 days. Critically ill worldwide is 53,000. That number is important to watch as well. 17,075 here in the United States. And that number has been staying in the 17,000s for now 2 weeks plus. We used to have an average around 14 to 15,500 critically ill, and that was during the peak of the cases. So to see this 17,000 continuously critically ill, 200 may fall off at the beginning of the day, and then 400 comes back. Those are numbers to watch. Brazil also starting to pile up on the critically ill, 8,300. India, now folks, they closed everything down with 5 cases. They closed the entire country down over 5 cases. 1.7 billion people went on lockdown. India right now sits at about 197,000 cases. So that's the way you slow the spread with a population like India. And imagine if they had what the United States have right now as far as our spread. 1.8 million cases. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because the events of last week into the weekend and potentially this week as well, as there's scheduled events all over the country. And that is the protest for George Floyd and actually everyone who has been murdered by the police. Now, for the most part, I have seen the masks being worn during these events. In fact, it's a little bit too convenient, in my opinion, to have to wear a mask right now. Easy to get away with stuff that you usually wouldn't get away with, I guess. So we're dealing with a pandemic that us as a country have worked so hard on getting this virus in some kind of manageable form where we can go back to a different normal, but manage it. Now the hospitalizations are down. Now we can manage an outbreak here and an outbreak there. I get it. But all that work that us as a country has done is possibly at jeopardy right now. Now, we had Memorial Day weekend, and it has been reported that there was a party goer in that viral pool footage that was all over the news. Hundreds of people there. It has now been confirmed that there was a person who was at that pool party that tested positive for coronavirus, which means that person already had it when he went to the pool party. There is a good chance that 30% at least of those folks have been exposed to this virus and are now contagious as well. Unknowingly, they're bringing it back home to their families. Those people that are back to work are bringing it to their jobs. I'm not trying to install any fear. I'm just telling you how it works. So if we're already hearing about a case from Memorial Day weekend, and really we didn't expect to start hearing about Memorial Day weekend coronavirus case upticks until about the end of the first week of June. 2 weeks from the event, basically. And then by the middle of the second week of June, we'd start to see a sense of, okay, were people smart during Memorial Day weekend? And if cases kind of pop up a little bit and go back down, then maybe we figured out a way to manage this better than we thought we could. But then the new test is going to be from a week of protesting. A week. We're not talking about a weekend day or even 2 days. We're talking 6 straight days now of thousands of people gathering with masks. I might add, I will say it's easily 80% of the people that are there are wearing masks. 80%. That might be a little high, but for the most part, I see a lot of people wearing masks. But again, that's very convenient. So the real test for COVID-19, and mark your calendars, folks, we are now targeting anywhere from the middle of the second week of June for the Memorial Day stuff, and the end of the third week into the end of the month of June for protesting and beyond. So we're watching, there's going to be a 2-week interval here, the middle of the month and the end of the month. I feel like if we can gauge what those look like, and we have, let's say we have less cases, well, now we know we can open up a little bit more as a country. Or let's say we have a huge spike and California becomes the next New York. Philadelphia becomes the next New York. So what does that mean? If it goes good, that means we can open up the country. That means we can breathe a little less easy and start feeling better about going back out again. If we're sitting here in July 4th, and cases are steady or declining, and we're not seeing those big hot spots from this potential exposure during these riots and protests and the Memorial Day weekend celebrations, I think a good would mean, all right, we're on the right track. This virus, we might have it beat. But if we see a spike here and there, that doesn't mean alarm. But if we're seeing multiple spikes and they start growing and doubling throughout the month of July, and by the end of July, we're looking at 140,000 deaths or more, and maybe we're at 2 million cases or 2.5 million, we're already going to be at 2 million by July. That's no doubt. Or close to it. My point is, if it goes bad, then there has to be unity on how we go about doing things moving forward. We cannot deny it anymore. If it does go bad, people have to realize that this was not exaggeration about the contagiousness of this virus and what it can do. And if you get complacent and you let up on social distancing and just go back to the old normal, if it goes good, that means we're in the right direction. If it goes bad, we need to be extra careful. And it should be a lesson for the entire world that a second wave is either possible or not possible. So the world is watching the United States of America right now for more than just one reason. And it's all about how we respond now. Are we ready? Should hospitals and all medical facilities everywhere start making your orders now? And if you have too much, then you have too much and you have enough to get you through the next few months. That's good news. But if you're not ready by July 1st, I'm afraid that it'll be too late if people start making orders for PPE and ventilators on July 1st. There's nothing wrong. We've been through too much with this lockdown. We've been through too much. And if we don't want to revert back into another similar situation of a lockdown, we've got to be ready. We've got to be able to handle the capacity. So a lot of this ties into this whole situation. It's crazy to imagine. I mean, 17 million Americans have been tested for this virus. That's an amazing feat. I'm proud of that. But there's other countries too, like Russia. They've got 10 million tests done. They rank 3rd in the world. What's really scary is Brazil. This is extremely concerning. They have only tested 930,000 people, and yet 500,000 people have tested positive. 50% of nothing of their population has been tested right now. Those numbers are quite alarming. So let's get into the politics of the riots, the protests. Friday night, it was reported that President Trump was briefly moved to his bunker Friday evening as protests were being held near the White House. Sunday, the Justice Department deployed the U.S. Marshals Drug Enforcement Administration agents to Lafayette Park outside the White House to assist the National Guard. Again, this really got intense over the weekend from Friday into Sunday. We didn't have this presence on Thursday, I don't believe. So President Trump, wow. Let's start with the tweets. The tweet that when the looting starts, the shooting starts. Now, I'll give you both sides. Trump claims that he didn't know that this police chief of Miami in 1967, who was very well known to be a racist person, also did not care if you thought he was being accused of police brutality. He enjoyed that. That was known about this police chief. So the quote, when the looting starts, the shooting starts, comes directly, word for word, from that police chief. So people who are well versed in their history and civil rights immediately were outraged. Now, President Trump claims he didn't know it. He was just stating the obvious facts. Hey, people start shooting at people when they start getting things stolen from them. Okay, fair enough. You're right. But are we that naive? The way he phrased it in his tweet and then said thank you after that, and ended the tweet with the word thank you, exclamation point. In a time where he had to be briefly moved into a bunker, the only thing he offered was, when the looting starts, the shootings start. Thank you. Now put me in my bunker. I think it is time for a leader, our president, to address the nation. I think it is time for our president, the leader of the United States of America, to try and inject calm, urge peace and understanding, but also being firm about the violence and the looting. That will not be tolerated. Nobody is tolerating the looting and the fires. Nobody. That is not acceptable. In fact, we've seen so many footages of these protests, and sometimes you'll see the protesters who are really there for George Floyd stopping people who are there trying to destroy things. Say, hey, what are you doing? Grab them by the shoulder, try to talk some sense, and then they get into a fight. There's a lot of talk about a possibility of an organized group being paid to infiltrate with the real protesters, the peaceful ones anyway, and cause the destruction and damage. I've heard white supremacists, we've heard Antifa, possibly other domestic terrorist groups that could possibly be plotting. We've heard it all. But what is amazing, during all of this time, we need calm, we need leadership, we need assurance, we need our spirits lifted. It's in your backyard, folks. I don't know a city that is not dealing with demonstrations, even the little towns. We had one last night where I live. I'll get into that here in just a minute. This is the largest unrest in my lifetime ever. And they're only covering a dozen or so, maybe 15 cities right now. It's everywhere. I heard it was in Albany. I'm like, oh, good. It's in Albany. That's an hour away. We don't have to worry about any violence or police brutality here where I live. No, they're not just covering regional. They're touching base on every city. And listen, I think there's notes being taken here. They're taking the temperatures of all these little towns. Who's racist? Raise your hand. But we need calm. We need leadership. We need guidance. And what has the president done? Threatening tweets, calling governors weak, And I'll get right back to this here in a minute. You have to dominate. If you don't dominate, you're wasting time. Very true. Especially with the situation. With the looters and the people setting fires and the destruction. Yes, that's absolutely true. But the part that's difficult about this is, how do you separate, if you're a National Guardsman, a police officer, and you see a crowd of people, you see some that are just shouting and holding up signs, and then you see people hurling rocks. How do you say, okay, just that one, but leave those guys alone? How do you do that at the heat of the moment? And President Trump, instead of offering words of advice or guidance, he's calling them weak. According to a source on the call, Trump was annoyed with governors for the response to the protests and urged law enforcement to crack down and make more arrests. You've got to arrest people. You have to track people. You have to put them in jail for 10 years, and you'll never see this stuff again. Are you kidding me? In a time where protesters around the world... I'm going to get to that real quick. Sorry about that, folks. In a time around the world, and that actually was necessary, that noise, but a time in the world where a group of people, of American citizens, are finally saying enough is enough. The whole reason why we are having this problem lies in the answer of the President of the United States. You've got to put them in jail for 10 years. You'll never see this stuff again. And I know there's white people out there too, so it's not just all black people that would be arrested. But again, guys, the prison system is not a business. We're out here releasing prisoners because of coronavirus. This is tough. You have to arrest more people and put them in an unventilated area together for multiple hours? These guys that go to the holding cells to be processed, can you imagine if a city arrests 500 people in one 3 or 4 hour period? People are crammed in these holding cells for hours and hours and hours. So you have the risk of the virus. But again, I'm not making excuses for the people creating the violence. I want them to be arrested. I want them to go to jail. If you're destroying somebody's property, if you're stealing from that property, if you're setting fires to that property, you should be held accountable. What I don't want to hear is a threatening tone from the leader of our country of, by the way, that is suffering and is hurting right now, because it's not just black people, it's white and black people, people of color, white people, all of us are joining in on these protests. Trump was described by one person on the call as losing it, with another saying the president called the governors fools and expressed anger with Democratic mayors in particular over the protests and unrest ravaging cities nationwide. Goes on to say that Trump said that other countries watching this situation unfold think Americans are pushovers. You have to dominate. I already read that part. The president also called the initial response in Minneapolis weak and pathetic, and said that protesters have likely spread out to other cities. The person said Trump seemed obsessed with Antifa or anti-fascists and Occupy Wall Street, which he said was handled well by comparison and just went away in one day. Like the coronavirus, right? During the call, Trump claimed to have intelligence showing who the bad actors and professional instigators are. Oh, neato. Our president is a private eye detective. Though he did not elaborate. Just like when he claimed Obamagate, and that's what crime that Obama was guilty of. And his answer was, oh, you know what it is. You've seen it. Just be specific. Yes. Do I think Obama's administration did some shady stuff? Absolutely. Absolutely. There was a lot of shady stuff that happened during Obama's watch. Not just Benghazi, but all kinds of stuff. Climate change related material. Taxes, laws that were changed, marriage laws that were changed without any votes. It just one day the house was lit up in rainbows and it's legal for everyone to marry, which is fine. That's not the point, though. Usually it's a process. You hear about excitement building up for things like that, but we didn't hear that. So there was a lot of things that were weird in Obama, but I'll tell you what, it wasn't like this. Even though we had ISIS running rampant abroad. Now, we have an uprising right here by our own people. Whether you want to claim the violent ones or not, they are from the United States of America. I've never, ever hoped that I would ever have to think or talk about our country under attack from people who are from this country. And I'm not talking about Black Lives Matter. I'm not calling them I'm talking whoever the group of people are that are causing the problems, because I do believe they are being infiltrated with the peaceful protest. I want that to be clear. I do not believe that Black Lives Matter is a violent gang of thugs. I believe that there is good purpose in some of these folks, and there are a few bad apples that accumulate other bad apples, and they're being lumped together as one. We've seen evidence of peaceful protests, especially when you see brown, black, white, all of them standing together, sitting together, hands up together. I don't think those are the folks that are the problem. What you need to watch out for are the people who cover their entire face with a mask, goggles, a hoodie. That's the ones that seem to be throwing rocks at windows, setting fires. Not the 21-year-old kid out of college with his Weezer t-shirt and his flip-flops. All right, he's not there to start a fight. Anyway, we keep going here. Trump also asked states to enact laws against flag burning in what the source described as a rant. So he went on a rant about the flag. And then the White House billed the event as a video teleconference with governors, law enforcement, and national security officials on keeping American communities safe. Several governors pushed back on Trump's narrative, including J.B. Pritzker of Illinois, a Democrat. The source said Maine Governor Janet Mills, also a Democrat, was concerned about President visiting her state this week because of security. Maine is home to Puritan Medical Products, the company the administration compelled through the Defense Production Act to produce coronavirus testing swabs. The response from Trump to the unrest has been to call for stronger law enforcement rather than calling for calm, addressing the concerns about police brutality and racism that many protesters say drove them to come out. Critics say an escalation in force would exacerbate already high tensions between protesters and police. I agree with that. And that's why you saw Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday getting a little bit off the chain. They had to handle this with kid gloves. Plus, they didn't have the numbers. Even when they got the 500 people from the National Guard, they still didn't have the numbers. Trump had no public events scheduled Monday. Who cares? Trump's advisors have been divided over what role the president should take in responding to the widest unrest in the country has seen in decades. Some say the president should focus on his message on Floyd, the black man who died last week at the hands of Minneapolis police, and urge calm. Others say the top priority is stopping the violence and looting that have taken place in some areas, arguing that the best path to that end is strong police tactics and not presidential speeches. So, in other words, talk is cheap. We don't need that. The time for urging calm is over. It stops now. That sounds like a pretty defensive government. A government who doesn't really care about working through this major issue. Folks, we've never seen this before. Of all places in the world to expect a riot over the police brutality issue, I would have never said Minneapolis. I would have said New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, Atlanta. You know, those are the areas that type of stuff happens, right? Minneapolis, Minnesota, of all places. And we have people of all walks of life who are here supporting. And you want to ask how this all stops? Nobody has the answer right now, except maybe Trump. Maybe it is excessive force. Maybe it is. But is that going to help? Is that going to calm anything? I don't think so. You could help yourself, for one, by arresting the other 3 officers. That's the first start. They are accessories. The police chief has already said they are complicit. That will help the protest size, I think. I think phase 2 for the protesters, for George Floyd, to make sure they watch this case, once you get the arrests and the charges, now you go to phase 2. Now you go into organizing groups to talk to community leaders in a sit-down fashion over the next several weeks. All right? Because it's going to take time for this court of law to play out. And I hope to God that these officers are convicted of their crimes. If there is any acquittal of any of these officers, of any charge, dropping a murder charge down to a gross gross negligence, if there's anything like that, or they just get off altogether, that's it. You have launched the protest of a lifetime, of history, of mankind, a point of no return. So let's be honest. You'll have people say, well, are these cops going to get a fair trial? Look at all the media attention it's getting. Look at all this. How could you have a jury, a true, pure jury, come in and just base their decision on the facts in the courtroom and not all this outside noise? And that's true. How are you going to find that? But it's simple, folks. I don't know if you've watched the video of George Floyd, the whole thing, all the way to the end where they put him on the gurney and put him in the ambulance. Once you see the last part of this video, that's it. Something will happen, something will click, something will anger you about this. And that's what happened with me. Watching 3 cops, one with a knee to a neck, a knee to the back, a knee to the legs, for over 2.5 minutes. This guy wasn't moving. He'd pissed himself. He was dead. The ambulance shows up. They drag him over to the gurney. I mean, there was no coordination. They just grabbed him like he was just a bag of trash. Dragged him. It was only because the onlookers were saying, hey, man, you're just dragging him. And then they'd stop and they'd all get together and try to help and put him on the gurney safely. Didn't even take the handcuffs off. Imagine how comfortable that would be. Lying unconscious on a gurney with your hands behind your back, just being tossed around. George Floyd's lifeless body was loaded into the ambulance. The doors were shut. The cops went to their cars. Nothing to see here, folks. Have a nice day. It's such a bizarre situation. I just, watching the rest of the video, and of course the media won't show the whole thing. I tell you, it's way too graphic. It will traumatize you to watch this knee being driven into this man's neck. If me and you did that, we would be arrested on sight. There wouldn't be any waiting around and see if we have enough evidence first. That's not how it works. When you're at probable cause, you get arrested. There's probable cause on those videos. He should have been arrested. Point blank. There's your probable cause. He's caught on a video. Again, if I did it, I'd be arrested on the scene. If they had a video of me putting my knee into somebody's neck and that person died and I still wouldn't get off of them, oh, God. I'd be in jail right now. They wouldn't give me a $500,000 bond either, and that's a joke. $500,000 for murder 3 that I think will probably go to a murder 1. There's a new autopsy report today coming out, the second opinion. We'll see what that says, but I think murder 2 is definitely a reasonable. It should have been murder 2 right off the bat. Murder 1's going to be hard to get, but when you think about it, and know this, the officer was told that they could not find a pulse on Floyd, and the officer did not get up. Didn't get up. I can't find a pulse. I'm going to keep my knee on his neck anyway. Listen, I get it. You're trying to, that guy's massive. That dude's a big guy. 6'4", probably. 235. I mean, he looked like he was built. I get it. But watching the video, from the minute they pulled him out of the car, he cooperated the whole time. Yeah, he collapsed in front of the car. Some think he was just trying to make the cops' job harder. They had to carry him. Some say he collapsed because he was on a toxicant that put him into a fit, and the cops got frustrated with him. So that's why they roughed him up, because they thought, well, he's just being a wise ass. But there's more to it than that, because now there's stories out that this cop and George Floyd worked together at the same club as security. And, Maury, I don't know if you've heard this. There are now reports that there are people out there who did not know that this guy was even a cop. Nobody knew he was a cop. I need to look more into that. Whether he was freshly hired or deputized, I don't know. The whole thing stinks. But after I watched that video in full, I then understood why this was the straw that broke the camel's back. All I'm saying is that we need to be assured that we will be okay, that the government of this country wants to work together with these communities and help make things equal and address the needs that should have been addressed decades ago. Guys, let's think about the word racism. These people had been discriminated upon because of the color of their skin. That's it. And I lived with a person who was racist. And it would frustrate me every time that he would make a comment about an individual because of the color of his skin. When in real life, I knew the truth about that person. And what a great guy they were. So racism is an ignorant thing. But for some reason, the cosmos made it work out to where people of color are the ones that are discriminated. For some reason, Caucasians, white people, somehow got out of this whole racism thing. Now, I know there's going to be people saying, oh, that's not true. There's black people that hate white people. I'm sure there are. Okay, I'm not saying that there's not racist people on both sides. But when you think back on why there's racism in the first place, you get my point. And we could sit here for hours and go on and on and on and on. And I'm not enabling this group of people. But if you look back in history and see how African Americans have been treated over the decades, there's been some great people that have been suppressed because of the color of their skin. They don't get the same job opportunity because of the color of their skin. They don't get the same choice to live in a decent house because of the color of their skin. There's bad white people, there's bad black people, there's bad Mexicans, there's bad Hispanic, there's bad Indians. There's bad and good on every race. So, our president right now, in my opinion, is not facing the facts and the truth of the problem. These people feel as if they are under attack at all times, and enough is enough. And when you watch the footage of a black man being murdered in front of people in broad daylight, and the way they treated his body afterwards and just left the scene as nothing happened. Okay? That's it. When is it going to stop? When is it going to stop, guys? Again, there's opportunists out there taking advantage of the situation, and they're tearing up our cities, looting and setting fires, and I don't condone that. And those are people who I believe are waiting for the moment to strike. Sure, it's a good possibility that the left, the extreme left, might have something to do with the destruction. I've seen theories out there right now that there was an actual cop that was caught on camera busting out windows, as if to make it look like the protesters were breaking things as they walked through. Instead of just grabbing the bad apples, let's get them all. And that's what Trump's saying, too. Get them all. Get them off the streets. 8 o'clock's a curfew. They're not off the streets. Get them. Get them off. Put them in jail for 10 years. That'll teach them. How do you think that makes a college student feel right now who is black and who is angry and who's upset, who maybe isn't even in the protesting part of this? Maybe they thought about attending a rally to show support for their community. But now you hear this kind of talk and you fear because you're black, you can't go to that peaceful protest rally because you're afraid that you might get arrested. You've got a president who is charged up and ready to arrest everyone and put them in jail for a long time for speaking their mind. Some cases it's bad, it's burning and looting, I get that, but they're not all there doing that. So the good person who might have had a positive impact on their community by being a positive person out in the protest and not urging violence is now going to stay home in fears of being incarcerated, a person who doesn't belong in jail, obviously. So any chance of having the community do-gooders out there of being the self-police of the protest, that got smaller with that comment. And I want to make one more point before I leave. In my own town where I live, there was a small group of Black Lives Matters protesters. About 100, 150 of them. About sunset, more came. They chanted, "I can't breathe." They chanted, "Black Lives Matter." They were a young group of kids who were peaceful, who did not leave. From what I heard, there was no reports of vandalism. There were no fires. A couple of violent, tense moments, but I'll tell you why here in a minute. For the most part, these people were expressing their First Amendment rights lawfully. Now, the police did have to disperse them, and it got late, and it's like, all right, that's enough. Let's get them out of here. Time to go. Now, I'll tell you what happened during this time. I just explained to you how they were protesting. So ask yourself, does that bother you? Does that bother you that people are peacefully protesting and they're trying to communicate a message? Okay. It bothered a group of people here who are Trump supporters. One guy actually got on Facebook and started a nasty rumor, and it scared people. It made me concerned. The rumor was a video of a guy driving around in his car. He looks dead into the camera and he tells folks, "I just got a call. I wish I didn't, but I just got a call that BLM is coming to our town and they're going to set the city on fire. They want to burn our city down tonight. No joke. Get at me. We need to get together." Yeah, I saw that and I, red flags everywhere. I shared it with Mari. I got in touch with a person I know who lives in the community who has law enforcement connections. So a couple hours later, the protest starts at the center point of our town. That group is there with their megaphones and their Trump flags and insulting the group of people, making fun of them, yelling Trump 2020. When the kids were, and I say kids because they were young, when the kids were chanting, "I can't breathe," the Trump supporters who were not wearing masks, I will say all of them, none of them were wearing masks. When the Black Lives Matter protesters were saying, "I can't breathe," with their masks on because they're following guidelines, the Trump supporters without masks yelled, "Then take off your mask if you can't breathe," with people laughing, thinking it was funny. Thinking it was funny. So you've got these white 35 to 50-year-old men smoking cigarettes, spitting on the ground, not wearing a mask, insulting the group of friendly, peaceful, young protesters. And they were bullying them, counter-protesting them. And all they yelled was Trump and Pence, Trump and Pence, Trump 2020, Trump 2020. It was like a campaign rally. And then I stood back watching these videos. And it really questions who I have to support and calling out BS. Guys, I can't pretend anymore. But we have a president who lacks the leadership qualities that stand with President Ronald Reagan, that stand with George Bush, that stand with other great Republican presidents. Now, I'm not saying they were perfect, but they were presidential. They would address the nation in a time of crisis. They would try to urge calm. This president isn't doing that. Instead, he's calling his governors weak. Put these guys in jail 10 years. They'll never do it again. I heard the call, parts of it. It's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. So what I'm saying is, not all Trump supporters act the way that the ones that were acting last night. But it's appalling to me that these folks, these Trump supporters, showed up to harass young people who were very, very peaceful, who are not causing problems, who are there in the same reason that everyone around the country is doing. They are telling people enough is enough. It is time for justice. It's a time for equality. Amari brought up something interesting to me this morning. This could be setting up for the ultimate reset of all time. Well, the dogs aren't happy about that, but it's possible. This could be leading up to the biggest reset in the history of civilization. Because how else are we going to fix this right now? How are we going to stop these organizations and these protests? We have another one scheduled in our town. We are nothing but 50,000 people. But I tell you something, it doesn't look good. These group of Trump supporters out there being racist, insensitive, insulting. They're taking notes. I'm not saying that they're justified to come back and start trouble this week, but they're not going to forget how they were treated, and they got treated like crap for no reason. So it's a bad look. So instead of being a cowboy out there, people need to stay home, stay out of this if you have nothing to do with it. That's my opinion. Stay home, stay out of it if you have nothing to do with it. If you've lived that life, and you've gone through that pain and that trouble because family members in your family have died the way George Floyd died, then get out there and be heard. But if you live in a little nice, quiet old mountain town, some rural farm area, and you've lived the life that most Americans would dream of, shut up. Shut up. That's not, in fact, you're the person that needs to stick up for this community right now. That's what they need. They need credible people to stand up for them. Unfortunately, when you're dealing with young folks, they act more with their heart than their brains, and sometimes they don't always communicate the way they need to, and it comes off bad. So what they need is they need mature people to step up who are white, who will defend them, who will say, yes, it's right, it's not right, we need equality. No one's willing to do that. Nobody. So instead of going out there and harassing these protesters if they're peaceful, go home. Don't embarrass me. You don't stand for my town. I'll tell you that right now. I know a lot of people in this town, and they're not like that. So unfortunately, we had a pack of bad apples, just like every town, and they're white. Anyway, I'm sure a lot of you are going to be upset with me about this because I've really been down on Trump on this. But when I see racist statements, when the looting starts, the shooting starts, when I see him on calls to his governors on Monday, first thing of the week, and you're being told by your president, you're weak. You have to handle this with kid gloves. If we would have handled it the way Donald Trump wanted to handle it by Wednesday, it would be way worse. There's more people out there than there are soldiers in all these cities. You can't police every city the same way. Now, I'll admit, if they would have got the National Guard into Minneapolis a little quicker, I don't think the 3rd Precinct would have burned. So I will admit that was probably the worst of all the action in that state. The mayor probably should have had the National Guard there by Thursday. You know the weekend's coming. You know it's going to be a little bit different. So I'll give Trump that. But still, I don't want to see people being negative. The first thing they need to hear from their leader to get their work week started is not "you're weak." It's, guys, how do we work together to take care of this? We have a big problem that we've ignored for many, many decades. How do we heal? How do we find a way to calm and soothe and stop the madness? Instead, he just says, put them in jail. Put them in jail. 10 years. Yeah, you won't see any more of that. And that's the problem, guys. And that's why the protests are happening. Because the important leaders of this country, politicians, even celebrities, no one's out there talking about this. No one of importance that's of value to our culture is even speaking out about this. No one's trying to offer. It's almost like some of them are like, yeah, let it happen. Yeah, let's watch it burn. You know, it does feel like that. It feels like, I don't know if it's Democratic supported that way, but it does feel like there are a group of people that want to see it just go down. And there are people out there who are Trump haters that are really, I mean, look what the FBI tried to do to Trump. Don't tell me they weren't biased. Peter Strzok, come on. So if Peter Strzok of the FBI could act like that, just think about how the rest of these state officials are acting right now. Oh, this is hurting the president's image. We'll wait on calling the National Guard. Let's let them burn a few buildings down and we'll get some government funding and we'll be okay. I get that. I'm saying that I understand that could be happening in certain states. But I'm also saying that the underlying problem has to be addressed, or there's no way this stops. And there's been no effort at this point to calm or urge anything peaceful. It's been negative. It's been forceful. It's been insulting. It's been, I've watched some media news networks. Some are sympathetic to the Floyd and the members of those communities. And then the other channel is so worried about the money. They're so worried about the economy. They're so worried about material things. Hey, let's check out the Dow Jones real quick, guys, before we leave, because this is crazy. We finished 70, well, we're not done yet. We usually do this in the evening, so we're still going. We're up 72 points on the Dow Jones right now. 40 million unemployed, and we are up on the Dow, and we have been every day by a little bit every day. Our cities have burned for 3 straight days. And the stock market says, well, we're doing fine. Everything's okay. Pandemic's still going. Nope. Stock market's going up. Keep going. I mean, does anybody else think this stinks? How is it that we're going through a pandemic? 40 million Americans filed for unemployment benefits. Now we're dealing with looters and shooters and burnings and properties and businesses being destroyed. So there is a chance for them to come back and open up after this pandemic. Now they have to buy a new building. They have to buy new inventory. Yeah, they got insurance money, but their deductibles go up now. But the stock market says we're doing just fine. Everybody calm down. It's all right. We're just having a couple of riots and a pandemic. Everything's fine. Unbelievable. I'm sorry. Don't tell me Trump is just that good. No. Do you guys remember the first stimulus package that was passed? It was worth $2.2 trillion. And then they had the Treasury there with them. And they added, also, we will be adding $4 trillion to the package for investments, stock market related type liquidity to keep the markets flowing. In fact, I think he said something like it was going to help prop up the economy, $4 trillion. So they didn't talk about that. They just briefly, thanks for the 2.2 trillion and everything we got, and we also got 4 trillion that we could dispose at our whatever. Anyway, moving on. No one talked about that. No one gave a damn. It's like, oh, it's $4 trillion going in the stock market. Yeah. These are false numbers, folks. I'm trying to paint a picture here. This comeback, we're not even open all the way. Our restaurants aren't having dine-in restaurants yet, not everywhere. How is this possible? And then when they get to Q3 and the Q4 projections and companies got to make decisions, am I going to be able to make a profit this year? How do I get profit? Boom, lay off people. So you get wave 1 of unemployment, and then you get wave 2. We're already in depression numbers for unemployment, but the stock market says we're on the rise. Watch out, folks. Here comes the United States of America. Meanwhile, folks are getting their back pay of unemployment and stimulus money coming in, and you sit and you start to wonder, like, where in the hell is all this money coming from? The government is spending record amount of money on the people through the unemployment benefit package part, stimulus checks, giving out loans to small businesses. I mean, and the stock market says, we're fine. We're fine. I would say I'm in the middle, folks. I'd prefer a presidential candidate who had some of the business strategies that Donald Trump had. Some of the trade deals have been okay. The tax cuts, the job starters, there's been progress in that. But I also want a president who believes in core values as well and knows how to be a leader in times of hopelessness. And I'll tell you what, I guess the reason why I'm so fired up is because I couldn't believe that this protest came to my town, a town that doesn't have that much problems at all. Some bad checks and a couple weird crimes, but that's really it. So it woke me up. Things aren't going to change with the current way of thinking from either party. Joe Biden basically is just, he's a Band-Aid. He's just going to say things that's going to make you feel better. You're going to feel so much better. Trump's that tough love that gets things done. But I don't think right now is a time to enforce that tough love. I think now we have to focus on understanding and trying to figure out a way to get the conversation started of a better America, of equality and peace for everyone. That's going to do it for me today, guys. Thank you for listening to Middleman Politics. We hope everyone has a safe week. I have a feeling I will be broadcasting again throughout the week, especially on Friday, June 5th, possibly a late night broadcast for that, as we are expecting some of our own events happening in our own town. We'll cover that if we can, but we hope everyone is safe. And listen, again, I don't want anybody to think, I'm not condoning the violent, the looting, and the fire setting. I'm not condoning that. That has to stop, and those people is not a part of what the peaceful protest is about. I am separating. There are a group that is trying to disrupt, and there's a group that's trying to make real change. The group that's trying to make real change is trying to do it peacefully, but loud, but peacefully. Guys, have a great day, and we'll talk soon. Take care.
you.